afternoon, everybody. My name's Charlie Nicklin. I'm the CEO of IAgrE, and I'll be your host today. I think we can still officially wish everybody a happy new year, although it doesn't seem much better than the last one at the moment with everybody in lockdown again. Anyways, thank you for all for joining our first lunchtime lecture of 2021. I'd like to welcome Kit Franklin as our guest speaker today. Kit is going to talk about how robots are redefining the future of farming. I'm sure many of you will know Kit. He's a senior lecturer in ag engineering at Harper and also sits on our executive committee in the IAgrE. Kit is a founder member of the Hands Free Hectare project, which has now moved up a gear into the Hands Free Farm. So as Sarah said, you're all currently muted. So if you want to ask questions, then use the chat function at the bottom of the screen. And then at the end, we'll unmute you so you can ask your question. So with no further ado, over to you, Kit.
Great, thanks, Charlie. I'll just share my correct screen. Hopefully that'll be with everyone shortly. Yeah, I'm going to talk today. I'm going to go through a talk that I did for New Scientist for their New Scientist live event before Christmas. Massive caveat, it was an event for the wider public, obviously public with some interest in science and technology, but nonetheless the sort of wider population. So please don't expect this to go too in depth into the nitty-gritty of robotic techniques or anything. This is a sort of overview of my view of where robotics is going. There's a section on the work that I do in Hands Free, but also the wider world of agricultural robotics as well. So hopefully sort of quite high level, but quite interesting, and some of it many of you will have seen before, but maybe other bits will be new, hopefully. Okay, so sorry, just get started. So okay, so I'm talking from here at Harper. As I say, as everyone knows, we're all on lockdown, but I am actually in my office today to have some good internet to talk to you all on. Harper's in the middle of the Shropshire countryside, as most of you will know. And the work we do here is based out of the Agricultural Engineering Innovation Centre. And as the little graphic there shows, despite Harper being quite a small institution, we punch above our weight when it comes to the sort of awards we win and the quality of our teaching and some of the research we do. So we're proud to do what we do. Firstly, then, let's start with what is agriculture and what is the background of what we're trying to achieve here. Agriculture is the ability through the use of science and technology for the few to feed the many. And I think we have to always remember that. And if you look back over the last 100 years, the population of the UK has increased from 45 million up to sort of 65 million, where we're at now. And in that same time, the number of people working on farms has dropped from 2.4 million down to 0.6 million. So now representing 1% of the population. So 1% of people on farm feeding the other 99%. And clearly that hasn't been achieved through standing still. That's been achieved by progressing, adopting new technologies and moving forwards. And despite the fact that many of the things I might say in this lecture might seem far out and crazy, I'm sure many of the things we do now as commonplace would have also seemed far out and crazy 100 years ago. How has that increase in production through with less people been achieved over the last 100 years? Well, I don't need to tell anyone on this call that largely it will be down to the adoption of mechanized agriculture and the development of the modern farm machinery and tractors and etc. that we currently use. And the machine we see on the picture here will obviously conduct the work that maybe 10, 20 people and 20 teams of horses would have done 100 years ago, all via one person and one seat in one cab. So there's the engineering aspect of how that growth in output has been achieved. The other angle has been the use of chemistry, I would argue, the use of ag chems and fertilizers to produce more crops from that limited area that we have, and reduce competition within our crops, etc. So the adoption of these technologies over the last 100 years has allowed the few to feed the many. And you can see if we look at graphs of yields, we had a gradual linear increase in yield per unit area of land, basically since the end of the Second World War through to the year 2000. What are the challenges to come sat where we are today then? Well, clearly our population is still growing. If we go then from a UK perspective and go to a global perspective, we're talking global populations of over 10 billion by the end of the century, and that is obviously going to require more food. But whilst that population is growing, we have the added challenge of dealing with climate change and the increase in temperatures. So we've got to produce more from less, being less damaging to our environment, and limiting the use of resource, and also be that things like land as well, when land is being sucked into housing of people that's growing, and we're losing land to desertification and things like that. So lots of challenges to come, feeding more people with less resources ultimately. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to meet that challenge potentially by the further adoption. Obviously, many people already have adopted, but the further adoption of precision farming, where we're looking to improve sustainability, reducing waste and increasing efficiency. It's all about doing the right thing in the right place at the right time and in the right way, the 4 rights of precision farming. We have to start out by observing variation in our land or in our groups of animals. Once we've observed some variation, we can then measure it, we can understand it, we can make a decision, and then we can hopefully control that variation. So that's the precision farming process as I see it, starting with an observation, which is generally not technology based, but then the other elements all require technologies. We need technology to measure that variation. We need technology to help us understand it, potentially to help us make decisions, and then we certainly need technology and engineering solutions to help us control variation. And this will hopefully in time move us from a field by field management scale to a subfield management scale, which is I think where we mostly are, and then one day hopefully to a single plant management scale. And when I started giving talks like this 10 years ago, the single plant was pretty far out other than in things like horticulture, but bear that one in mind and we'll come back to it later. So what are some successful precision farming techniques and that we've adopted so far? Well, high precision GNSS, global navigation satellite systems. Yeah, we've all got GPS on our phones and in our cars, but they tend to not be high enough precision for agriculture. They tend to be limited to meters of resolution and accuracy. We need more than that for agriculture. We want to be able to treat our plants as individuals. We need to know down to millimeters or at least centimeter accuracy. So how do we achieve that? Well, the reason that we're limited to meter accuracy with standard GPS is due to the way that GPS works. Time signals are sent to the Earth from GPS satellites. The time signals are refracted as they travel through the Earth's atmosphere and through the ionosphere. And that reaction adds a time delay in their travel. And essentially, GPS works on a basis of time of flight. So if that flight is extended through refraction, then so the accuracy of our position that we can calculate is reduced. So differential GPS is very simple in the sense that all it does is use a known base location at any given point, a fixed location, and at that fixed location we use GPS techniques to calculate the location of that fixed location, if you're following. And that will tell us the current error of our GPS systems. Once we know the current error, so if I know that my position and then I calculate a position and it's a meter inaccurate, I can assume that for my surrounding area, there is an error of 1 meter. And then we can beam that out to our vehicles and systems in field to correct them to centimeter level accuracy. This is done at different levels depending on what system you use. We've got regional correction systems such as EGNOS in Europe, which will get us down to sub-meter, maybe half a meter accuracy. But again, that's using regional bases, and the further we are from the base, the less accurate it gets. The more money we pay, the closer we get to our base station, essentially, to the point where we can have them in field and giving us centimeter accuracy. And how have we utilized that then? Well, we've utilized it to put things in the right place. Here you can see the classic skip line picture of a tractor using auto steer in a field, going up and down the field, increasing the efficiency that this tractor can operate because it doesn't have to turn back on itself, and it can come back through the field later and fill in the gaps, being exactly right and not missing any of the land area, and not overlapping and not underlapping. In advanced situations, we've adopted dual antennas, or even maybe more than 2 antennas in some really special circumstances, where we can not only steer the tractor in a straight line, we can actually use the tractor to drive in all sorts of weird ways in order to make sure the implement stays straight. So here's a John Deere system where the tractor is well offline, but it's compensating for the drill falling down the hill. So these systems, as we all know, hopefully on this call, have been fairly commonplace for the last 10 years, and have been available for the last 15 years, commonplace for 10 years, and really have got wide adoption in the UK and Europe, Western European markets, American market, etc. Some of the more exciting things that we've been able to do with GNSS then is auto section, where we take a sprayer boom or the tines on a seed drill, and we turn those on or off using our GPS location as individual sections or sub boom sections, in order to reduce overlap on already sprayed areas or already seeded areas, or of course avoid spraying no spray zones completely, water courses, ditches, etc. This is a system that I bang on about all the blooming time, because time and time again it's been shown to have 10 to 15% savings of product. That's a 10% to 15% saving in cost. It's also a massive environmental gain if we're not chucking chemicals in the wrong place, in ditches where they shouldn't be. So this is a no-brainer to me. It's a no-brainer from our environmental credentials as an industry. It's a no-brainer from the business aspect. And the systems that make this happen cost around £10,000 to adopt when you're buying a new machine, and on large scale farms can easily pay themselves off within a year. Yet the adoption of this is really quite poor still to this day, and it is one of the things that frustrates me intently. So it is an absolute no-brainer, section control, yet it seems to have stumbled on adoption. Another thing we've got then, or we're looking at quite a lot, is spectral analysis. And one of them being NDVI, where everything has a spectral response. That's the way we see colors. NDVI picks up on the spectral response not only in the visible light, but also in near infrared. And it uses the characteristics of healthy plants and unhealthy plants and their spectral response to be able to help us target our inputs of nitrogen, etc., into the field. So a healthy plant we see as green, and that's because it's absorbing all the other light and it's reflecting green. And it's critically it is absorbing lots of red light. A plant that is less healthy and is a bit brown or a bit orange and a bit brown, looking a bit sick, is reflecting red light. The light that it should be absorbing to photosynthesize is being reflected back at us. So if we know that relationship, we can look out for that in our plants to try and measure their healthiness. So a healthy plant should have very little red light reflected. An unhealthy plant will reflect red light. Now, conversely to that, or inversely to that, sorry, near infrared is absorbed by healthy plants a lot more than it is, a lot less, sorry, than it is by unhealthy plants. So unhealthy plants reflect less near infrared than healthy plants do. So it's an inverse relationship. We can put those measures therefore into a differential equation and get a very simple 0 to 1 reading of how healthy our plants is. Sorry, I've rambled over that really badly. I normally do a much better job of that if I do say so myself, but it's a very simple process. 2 attributes, one light that is absorbed by healthy plants, one light that is reflected by healthy plants. We can use that to basically analyze in a quantitative manner from 0 to 1 how good our plants are. Where are we doing that, or how are we doing that, and what are the advantages and the pros and cons of these systems? Well, we can take that NDVI technique and we can use it on satellite data. Sentinel-2 is one of the satellite systems that captures near infrared light. And we can use, there are 2 satellites in the Sentinel system. They orbit in 10 days. So we get a picture every 5 days from the Sentinel system. And they're great in the aspect that they add no extra workload to the farmer or the sort of farm advisor. The data comes off the internet every 5 days. However, they have some disadvantages. The resolution isn't that great. We're sort of 10 meter by 10 meter pixels, so really not superb in terms of the resolution. And also being up in the sky, clouds can be an issue for these things. So we can end up, certainly here in the UK, we can go weeks without getting a decent NDVI image if we're relying on satellite data. We could strap that same sensor to the tractor, much like Yara do, or in this sense, the Azara sensor. This is great. Again, no extra workload. We're going to drive through the field anyway to put some fertilizer on. So why not strap a sensor to that machine as it does it? And that's great for that aspect. Although what we have to realize is, again, the sort of resolution and the precision of this is a little bit limited because we're only looking at 2 little pads either side of the tractor as it drives through. So if we're spreading to 30+ meters, we're only looking at the crop either side of the tractor. We're kind of making an assumption that all of the crop in our bout width is the same, so which isn't going to be the case. So again, a limitation to that system. A system that's good, that's the best probably in terms of its precision and resolution, would be flying a drone. We can be under the clouds. We can capture data down to literally millimeter level with a drone. However, it has major disadvantages in the sense that we need to go out. It's an extra job. I've got to go out. I've got to fly my drone. I've got to crunch the numbers. To be honest, crunching the numbers has changed beyond recognition in the last 5 years. 5 or 6 years ago, when I first was involved with ortho mosaicing pictures coming from a drone, it used to take us 48 hours to ortho mosaic a couple of hectares. The system we now have on Hands Free Farm, ortho mosaics and NDVIs are images as we capture them real time. So we fly the machine. By the time the machine's landed, we have an NDVI of our whole field at centimeter accuracy. So the data and the analysis has kind of gone. That has matured, but it still does require this extra operation of going out to the field and making it happen and applying by all the legislation that comes with flying a drone and insurance, etc. Well, so again, remembering that I was talking that this talk was initially given to the public, I'm really proud to say that we as agricultural engineers, and I'm talking very much in the royal we, have adopted things like machine vision a long time before most people would expect it to have entered our industry. So here we see the Garford RoboHoe, obviously using Tillett and Hague technology to operate a guided hoe hoeing in our lettuce field here to hoe out weeds, cut chemical use, and essentially use some what is really novel, clever technology. And that's been around for 15 years commercially now, I think it is. I think it was 2005 it first was released as a commercial product. And every time I talk to the public, I am very proud to show this product, because people think that machine vision is a system that was developed, is a technology of the 2010s. And the fact that we were there as an industry at least 5 years earlier than people would assume it even existed is really marvelous. So well done to those involved. I'm sure some are on the call. Okay, so that's where we are then at the moment in terms of the technologies used on farm. What are some of the problems then? Well, we've got a lack of resolution for this thing called precision farming. We want to be treating every plant as an individual, yet I show you here a picture of a 12-meter combine header, and it's supposed to be, and it's showing us what is a pseudo sort of yield map, which shows a really tight sort of granular yield map here, which I hope most of you on this call would realize is not true. And reality is the yield map produced by this combine actually looks like that. It's limited to the width of the header. So in the time that precision farming has existed as a concept since the 90s, when yield mapping was first done, the precision of our precision farming has actually got worse, because the first combine header that yield mapping was fitted to was 5 or 6 meters wide, and now headers are 14 meters wide. So we've actually halved our resolution of our precision farming rather than increased it in the 20 plus years that it's existed. Same can be said then for spraying. We're going out and we're blanket applying chemical across a whole boom width, and a boom has now grown to maybe 40 meters in width quite regularly. In fact, there's a boom operating just outside Newport, where Harper is, at 52 meters, I think, on one of the farms around here now. So the precision at which we can put things into the ground, onto the ground, has reduced since the concept of precision farming was made. Another problem we face is a plateau in yield. I showed you the yield graph earlier in a good sense, but actually if we reanalyze it and we look from the year 2000 through to where we are now, the yields have essentially flatlined. And why is that? Well, again, a big reason, there's probably many reasons, but one of the big reasons is soil health. And extreme examples of compaction and poor soil health can be shown in this sort of scary picture here, where we get complete crop failure on headlands of fields due to the amount of compaction in those areas. So we have to consider how can we improve our soils and reduce this compaction. In really bad situations, we sink our huge heavy machines that we've developed up to their guts in soil, and we have to dig them out. And just because as humans we've not learned anything, here's some boys 100 years ago wishing they had a smaller, lighter steam engine. But you know, there we are. So how do we get here? Again, hopefully most of you guys know this better than I do. But it's all been about a drive for economies of scale. It's dealing with reduced raw labor, as I highlighted right at the start. This was all about managing to grow the crops we need, cover the land we needed to cover with a smaller amount of people. As farms have got bigger, the time windows in which things have to happen get smaller, and therefore larger machines have played a part in making that happen. And a thing that I go on about a lot is one-upmanship on farms, and the fact that farmers love to look over the hedge. If you've got a bigger, shinier tractor, I'll get a bigger, shinier tractor next time. And the amount of times we can walk onto farms and see implements that haven't changed in 10 years, but tractors that have grown in size by half as big again in those 10 years is regular. And I speak from a personal background where my brother uses the same drill, uses a 4-meter drill, used to pull it with 160 horsepower, now he pulls it with 240 horsepower. For what reason? Mostly so he can go down the pub and talk about his nice big tractor. There's a real emphasis that more power will solve our problems. I've got this really bad compaction issue. My small tractor that I currently own isn't big enough, isn't powerful enough to pull all this compaction out. I know what will solve it: a bigger, heavier tractor that will cause more compaction in its own right. That will solve my compaction issue, definitely. So we have to get rid of these addictions to power. We have to get rid of these addictions to bigger, shinier toys. What is the paradigm of the future then? And these ideas are not mine by any means, and many of you will know that these have been developed in academic circles in the last 20 plus years. Professor Simon Blackmore, formerly of Harper, was a really leader in these ideas. But could we, if we didn't need somebody sat on every one of our machines, there would be nothing stopping the machines going to an infinitely small size. So we could increase our precision farming resolution by moving to really small, nimble machines that I liken to vacuum cleaners in size and shape. These would be much more precise, treating every plant as an individual. They would reduce compaction due to the size being smaller and therefore the mass being smaller. Operating in swarms, they could cover the same area of ground, and the swarms would still require someone to manage them. They would still need somebody to charge them or refuel them, move them from field to field, pick them up when they fall over, program them. So I don't see this as a job slashing exercise. It's a job changing exercise. It's taking the tractor driver and turning them into a fleet manager. So we retain the jobs. Intrinsically safer. So I tell my story that if I go and if I go and automate the quad track that was on the last page and it goes AWOL and drives through the field fence, it will drive across the road through the house and kill the baby. If I automate a vacuum cleaner, it drives and it hits the hedge and the story stops. So we have an intrinsic safety benefit if we're moving to automation by reducing the scales at which we do things. Just to put some numbers on it then, this is some work I did as a student quite a long time ago now, when I was first getting interested in this area of work. And I calculated, and this is just fag packet sums, that if we plough a field at 150 millimeters deep, we move in the order of 1900 tons of soil per hectare of land. That's how much soil we move if we're going ploughing in a completely conventional system. If I use my tiny robot to go in, inject the seeds only move the soil directly around the seed as I was injecting it, I could reduce the amount of soil I move per hectare to 11 tons per hectare. 150 times reduction in soil movement. My fag packet maths in my head would tell me that's going to be somewhat in the order of 150 times less energy, I would have thought. So there is some major benefits potentially to moving to these systems of less impact, less weight, less work. Now, my problem was when I was looking at this, being a farmer's son, being the brother of a contractor, etc., these small vacuum cleaner robots kind of turned me off a little bit. I didn't quite believe that this was going to take over anytime soon. And when I spoke to the farming world, which I did all the time about this, I would regularly get the not in my lifetime or not in the next 50 years or not till 2050 sort of answer, because their perception of robot farming was it had to be these tiny, small robots, and it just didn't seem believable to many people. And that was when I started to go, well, hang about, we didn't really have these problems so much back when we were farming with T20 size tractors back in the 50s, 60s. So actually, do we just need to make autonomous smaller tractors when we had 5 tractors and 5 tractor drivers rather than 1 and 1? If we could revert to that, would that be a good step forward? And that's where we come on to the Hands Free Hectare. And I need to hurry up, I'm taking way too long, I apologize. Here I am as a student developing my first agricultural robot that wasn't very good. It was like all agricultural robots, it drove around and did not a lot. It looked good on a rugby pitch. We wrote some articles about it. It got in the Farmers Weekly, I think. I think we got on the front cover of Landwards, actually. But ultimately, it was just like every other academic robot that had ever been made. It didn't do anything. Here's my colleague, Jonathan Gill. At the same time, he was developing drones, and he was spending far less money, in the orders of a couple of £1,000s, to make open source technology driven from forums on the internet, and he was making his own drones. Before he could go and buy them, he was making drones out of hacked mobile phones, essentially, and these drones would work. They would fly dot to dot and land at his feet. And basically I said to John, well, could we take your reliable, cheap technology, put them in one of my T20 size vehicles, and could we farm with that? Would that be a better step forwards? We were both frustrated at the time. We were working in a lab here at Harper, and you can see our lab there in that big picture. But the problem is all the things we did in that lab, some of them which are really quite cool and interesting and high tech, I can't tell you about because they're all top secret, unless you're Jeremy Corbyn and you were a leader of the Labour Party at the time, and then we'd invite you in and show you how great we were. I wanted to show the wider farming world that we could do some really clever stuff. And at the time, I was being hampered by NDAs, etc. That was one cause of frustration. Another cause of frustration is that everything that when you typed into Google Ag Robot, you got the picture that you see on the right hand side there, which was a collection of university projects, this lot from the field robot competition, which is a great competition, great for students. But this was the perception of what agricultural robots look like, a hodgepodge of university projects, essentially, nothing more tangible than that. And that was a frustration from a marketing point of view and a PR point of view around agricultural robotics. When you looked at NASA and the stuff they were doing, they were landing rovers on Mars using sky cranes, across the other side of the solar system, yet we were being told that we couldn't farm with a robot, which seems slightly ridiculous to me. So lots of causes of frustration that made John and I decide that we would put this right, and we would do this thing called Hands Free Hectare, where we would grow a hectare of crop only using autonomous machines. So rather than most research projects where the autonomous machine was the end point of the project, for us, the autonomous machine was the start of the project, and using that to grow a hectare of crop was actually the end point. We were going to tell the world about this and we were going to publicize it, but it wasn't any good unless we could get it off the ground. And we teamed up with Clive Blacker at Precision Decisions, who's a real, who's really pushed precision farming forward commercially over the last 20 years, and teamed up with him to make this happen. He believes there's no such thing as a daft idea, and you don't learn until you try. And that was just the sort of mentality we needed for our crazy hands-free hectare idea. Commercial companies also backed us and said they'd support us with products and services and support to help us through this project. Here's a video of what it looks like. Most of you hopefully have seen this before, but here's our tractor to put a concept into how good this open source technology is. We started with nothing in October 2016, and by March 2017, this tractor was in the field doing farming. So that's 6 months to develop from scratch an autonomous vehicle, and that was all thanks to open source technology. You can see we also did things like the agronomy remotely, taking samples, and you can see how bad our first efforts were. Yeah, that's pretty awful. I was very proud at the time, but it is pretty awful. Our first crop, lots of misses, lots of wiggly lines. Our tractor didn't drive very straight, but frankly, for not very much money, and in a single year, we went from nothing to growing crops with robots. And at that point, nobody had done that. People had basically driven them around on rugby pitches. At this point is when we really claimed our world's first, when we actually managed to harvest the crop at the end of the year. So within a single year, we developed a tractor, a combine, a scout vehicle, a drone, and we farmed with those vehicles. And we showed that there's nothing stopping us technology-wise from farming with robots. To show that it wasn't just all a fluke done for the cameras, we went in the field 10 times in total, did 10 operations, doing everything you needed to do to farm a hectare of crop. As I said, it wasn't just the tractor work. We also did the Agronomy NDVI, as we've already talked about, using drones and scout vehicles to pull samples from the field. All of that done from outside of the field and allowing us to grow crop. How did it work? Well, GPS backed, RTK. We had a Wi-Fi telemetry link. You basically generate a route plan for the vehicle, and the route plan is uploaded to the vehicle, where it then goes and executes that route plan, going dot to dot around the environment. The laser, the red circle on the front of the tractor, represents a laser scanner that was there for a safety feature, so it would not crash through the fence that surrounded our field. And if someone jumped over the fence and stood in front of the tractor, again, it would stop from a safety aspect. But basically, it's running on RTK GPS following a preset route plan. And we just took the manual controls of the tractor and controlled them with linear actuators and motors and stuff like that. What do we do with the crop we harvested? Well, ideally, we wanted to make some beer with our barley that we grew. Unfortunately, we struggled to get hold of a brewer that would work with us, but we ended up making some gin instead. So we did hands-free gin, and this was good from a PR perspective. And the PR has been really important to this project, in the sense that we've managed to get this project talked about in 85 countries plus around the world. We've got thousands of people following us on Twitter and Facebook, and a few hundred on YouTube. Those social media numbers aren't that great in the world of social media, but they were good enough that we got noticed by mainstream journalists, and that's the really important thing. So our news feed would be picked up by a journalist, who would then sweep on down with a camera crew, take some shots, interview us, and publish us in newspapers and TV shows all around the world. So the impact of this project was massive, beyond anything we could have predicted. Although it was our aim to make a big impact, we certainly did not expect what we got. Because of that big impact, the AHDB decided to fund us for a second year. And we set us the challenge of obviously improving things and making a system that would be more acceptable to a farmer with less misses. And you can see that in that picture there. We've got a lot more crop in our field, a lot less misses, a lot straighter driving, etc. A critical thing then, back to the why agronomically is robotics a good thing? Well, In our second year, and I have to get my dates right here, so between October 17 and March 18, our second year of production, it rained 117 days of 160 days here at Harper. On the 14th of March, we needed to put the first fertilizer onto the wheat that we grew in our second year. Because of how much rain we'd had, no other farm in this area hit their timing for that fertilizer application. Everybody missed that fertilizer application by at least a week. We got it on the day it needed to go on, because basically our soil was good enough in the sense that we direct drilled it, we used light equipment, that it absorbed the rain, and the vehicle was light enough that we could go and drive across the field and put the input on. So it comes back to, why is smaller potentially better? Well, it allowed us to hit our timings, and that is absolutely crucial for the growing of any crop. Did it look like second year then? Hopefully you can see a visual improvement with this video that's playing now. Not only did the tractor drive faster, that's obviously sped up, but it really did drive faster. It also drove straighter, more crop in the ground, a better looking crop. We didn't farm it perfectly. We got pulled off to go and give live demonstrations at cereals and attend various shows and conferences, and that actually meant we ended up not doing the agronomy as good as we should have done, and we missed a couple of later timings. But nonetheless, we grew a crop, everything drove better, and we ended up unloading on the move between two robotic vehicles. And this was the image that I thought would go around the world and be viral, but it didn't, which sort of made me sad. I thought the sort of unload on the move autonomously would be the sort of perfect farmer porn, but it didn't appear to work quite like that. Oh well, can't win everything. What do you do when you harvest 6.5 tons of wheat? Well, again, you get Jeremy Corbyn here, and you show him the combine running. You take the seed from the combine, you mill it on the side of the field, and you make him a pizza. And you have Jeremy Corbyn, Islingtonian herbivore, as he's been accused, in the countryside talking about farming for an hour. And I don't think you could get better in terms of touching power than that. He might not have been in power, but as the leader of the opposition, getting him talking about farming, talking about food production, talking about automation for an hour in an environment that he will never forget, hopefully had some positive benefits for the UK farming industry. The technology we use then, it's quite cheap. Everything on the tractor you see there and everything on the drone that flies in front of it, you could have for £10,000. It's not, it's not telephone numbers. It's not crazy, NASA sums of money. The 10 grand's worth of electronics make this tractor drive itself. It's pretty cheap, really. And I'm sure we can make things happen for not very much. And in fact, we've then gone on to do an economic study that James Lowenberg here at Harper has led, and Dick Godwin and I and Carl have been also advisory on, where we've modeled the economics of this system, and we've shown that if you move from the conventional system, and the conventional system being as the farm gets bigger, the tractor gets bigger, to a system where as the farm gets bigger, you get multiple systems of a smaller size, we've shown that there's the potential to reduce the cost of production of wheat per ton by £30 a ton, in the order of £30 a ton. Now, bear in mind, if you look at the cost of production on that graph, if wheat's selling at £170 a ton, you're not making any money on a 100-hectare farm if you're farming it conventionally, but you are making money if you're farming it with robots. So the really important thing with this is it reduces the size at which a farm becomes economically viable if you use the model that we're discussing. We went on to make our tractor drive from our workshop out to the field, and this was our Drive to Field project under CAV-funded Connected Autonomous Vehicles. And you can see that the tractor would communicate with the gates, asking the gates to open and close as it approached them. It's driving along the tracks. It's looking out for pedestrians. When it sees a pedestrian, it slows to a stop. Prior to this, the tractor would have completely died. It would have done an engine kill. Now we slow and stop the vehicle. When the person faints, the tractor drives on. It drives out to the field, and eventually, when it gets to the field again, it will talk to the gate that's on the field side and let itself into the field, essentially. So it's asking the gates to open, the gates open, the tractor drives in the field. So this was all to do with looking at communication systems and wider safety aspects of navigating the farm environment. Where do we go from there? Well, we wanted to try and make a hands-free farm where we would look at doing all sorts of things, from automated replenishment of seeds and fuels to getting to the point where we operated in swarms. As I've talked about, we want more than one vehicle working in the same field at the same time. We want to look at more in-depth field monitoring and navigation of roads, and smart implements are all the sorts of things we try and aspire to do within what is the hands-free farm, which is now 35 hectares of land here at Harper Adams. Fields of different shapes and sizes and topographies, and we've got telegraph poles and trees and all the things that a real farm has. So no longer can I be criticized for my field being square and flat and easy. We have a real farm environment that we're now dealing with. This was us drilling our very first crop into the hands-free farm. This is our smallest field, very similar to our original field, really. This is blue pits of quite a clay soil. And you can see beyond is our second field, Middlemore, a much bigger field. And here's us back after the initial lockdown Mark 1, out in the field, planting a cover crop to try and salvage what had been a year that was disrupted heavily by both weather and the pandemic. So we got out into the field. We've got a slightly bigger drill, slightly bigger tractor, very slightly in both of those terms, out drilling our field autonomously for the very first time. So back in May, this was after the lockdown had eased and we got back into the field. I'll let this run just a little second longer, because the key thing we did was actually manage to then do the headlands. So prior, we'd only worked in the middle of the field. Now we're working on headlands and incorporating headland runs into the work we do. And I have to say that the automation on this tractor is now not open source. It's now being developed by a new partner we have on board, FarmScan Ag, who are an Australian company who've set up in the UK a development team in the UK working on this project and also trying to get into wider UK ag automation industry, really. So we're doing headlands as well as the internals of the field now. Once we grew our cover crops across our farm, then we spent the summer keeping on top of those cover crops, topping them, before then spraying them off, hopefully, which will now come up. Spraying them off, ready for the establishment of some winter crops. You can see again, we've got an Amazon sprayer that's been very kindly provided by Amazon UK. We've gone out into the field, we've topped off our cover, sprayed off our cover. We did some initial disking to chop up some of the residue, because we had a lot of residue, and finally drilled our winter wheat into, this is Middlemore, so this is a sort of 8 hectare field now, a much bigger field, and finally some pre-em spray. So we really have grown from our single hectare. Now we're in much bigger fields, much bigger landscapes, still using small autonomous vehicles to get the job done. Learning all the time. And the main aim of this, or from an academic aspect, the main aim of this is to refine these economic models and try and work out the exact benefit of moving to these systems. From the commercial partners' perspective, they are obviously developing products, and FarmScan and Precision Decisions hope that products that have been developed on the hands-free farm will be available commercially in the next couple of years. So this has a direct line to farm. Now, I'm going to leave my work now and go on to the wider world of agricultural robotics and some of the things that over the last year have caught my eye. I could go on for hours about the developments around the world, and the different companies that are doing this stuff around the world, but I'm going to just pull you up on the ones that are really catching my eye in the last year. So one of them is Small Robot Company. Small Robot Company are a UK startup, been around for 4 years now, I think, and I've been watching them all along. The reason they get into this presentation, though, is going right back to one of those early slides where I mentioned this aim to get to plant by plant level farming, and what you can see here is Small Robot's AI algorithms that are now doing just that. They have the robot that you see there pictured, which they call Tom, going out into fields with high resolution cameras, capturing images, and then they're running that through an AI system that is mapping and categorizing weeds within its system, within itself. And this is all done through some sort of online portal. At the moment, this is all pre-production, but I think they are rolling it out this year. And so they have partner farmers they work with, and some partner farmers are, I believe, starting to use this data. So we really have got to plant by plant level management with this system you're seeing here. So small robot, UK startup company that have really got to grips with this plant by plant precision management, or starting to anyway. They're really starting to work on that. Every plant being geotagged. Okay, another UK company, another UK startup, just to fly the flag a little bit, is Rover. Rover, again, they're both small robot company and Rover have heavily been influenced by Simon Blackmore and his work, and again are going down this plant by plant, small, light, almost vacuum cleaner like, but they don't really look like vacuum cleaners anymore. But this idea of plant by plant robots, both mapping weeds, weeding weeds, and then also harvesting. So they've got their retriever robot, which is going to go out there and harvest fresh produce, I believe. So again, this is a company that's been around for 3 or 4 years, but in this year they've actually started to get robotic platforms into the field, and I'd argue that they still look pretty prototype to me, but nonetheless they're in field doing work and starting on this journey of plant by plant management. If we look to the slightly wider world then and go across, we've got Aggro Intelli out of the Netherlands, I believe, with their robot called Robotti. This is a robot that is a gantry for all intents and purposes. Those of you who've been taking part in these lunchtime lectures will have heard, obviously, Tim talk about gantries a few weeks ago, a month or so ago. Well, here's a micro robotic gantry, essentially, as far as I can see it. It's going out into fields, being used with various implements to establish crops, establish plants. You also saw it working in a co-robotic sense, in the sense that it had people on it. They're not really got the grasp of what a gantry is supposed to achieve, though, because as you can see there, they've not driven the wheels down the same wheelings twice. So they're somewhat losing the advantage that they've gained by having a gantry. You can see that this wheel, as far as I'm concerned, should be over here, running down this tram line here. But anyway, maybe they will learn in time to better utilize the platform they've created. But it's a reasonable sized platform. It's still got a diesel engine in. This isn't some sort of electronic wizardry. This has still got a diesel engine and strapped to the side of it, hydraulic power pack, and is able to go out and do some fairly sizable farming, and specifically aimed at the fresh produce market. Another one coming out of, I think, the Netherlands again, is Agx Seed. Agx Seed is probably more where my brain's at in terms of the first steps of agricultural automation. It's a thing that is, looks a bit like a tractor, has some size, some weight to it, 115 kilowatts, not as large as the very big tractors, but sort of a sort of medium-sized tractor in today's market, I would guess, I would say. And this is out in fields, being a direct replacement for current tractors, much like what we're trying to do with Hands Free, a slightly bigger scale. But rather than have a tractor with a cab and a person sat in it, well, let's make a robot vehicle, not waste money on the cab, not waste money on the aircon, and let's stick the tractor driver in the office where he's monitoring the field and planning tasks from the comfort of his heated and air-conditioned office rather than cab. So again, I think this is going to be a real, this is really interesting. There are lots of people have been talking about things along these lines, but this is the first one I've seen out in the field really doing work. So I think many of you might not have seen this, even if you've heard most of what I've said before. This is definitely something new. And I can see as a sort of way into autonomous farming, certainly. We'll just let the video run slightly more. You can see how they've created a hopefully nice and self-explanatory user interface where you can plan tasks. You can also autonomously, robotically control the vehicle out in the field to set it off on its way, etc. But again, a real size relatable platform. I think most farmers will look at this and go, oh yeah, that's just a tractor without a cab, rather than what the hell is that crazy thing. So maybe an easier sell as a starting point. Now, Gus is a company from America, and it's a sprayer system that's been designed to work in orchards and almond plantations, to go out and do dusting of chems in those environments. Now, the reason I've included them is because they are producing robots at scale. They are producing tens per month. You can see in this one video I've just snipped out of Twitter for an example, they've got 8 robots working on one farm in one place. So when people say to me, this is all just still prototypes or just academic rubbish or nonsense, this is a company I can point to and say, well, here's a company that is making machines at scale, at volume. If you go onto Gus's website or onto that, they've got a pretty decent sized factory, and they've got low loaders leaving every week with machines on board, going out and onto farm. So this really is happening now. I question the legislative framework these things are operating under, but nonetheless, they're out there and they're operating. Another thing that made me sit up and pay attention in the last, well, actually just over a year, is that all the big companies, John Deere, AGCO, C&H, have all mostly put their fingers in their ears and gone la 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 when it's come to agricultural robotics for the last 20 years. Every time I've engaged with them, and I've engaged with every single one of those companies, I've had them all here to see our work, they all sit there and barefaced, deny that they would be considering doing anything that didn't look like a tractor. Now, Agritechnica 2019, suddenly John Deere had a whole section of their stand devoted to autonomous platforms, and those autonomous platforms did not look like tractors. They mostly looked like some sort of tractor hybrid. They had a gantry system. They had a big drone. So the fact that John Deere have sat up and actually sort of put their cards on the table that they are working on robotics has certainly made me sit up and pay attention, and I think shows that there is the weight of sort of momentum is in the robotics favor now. When you've convinced John Deere to play their hand, I think you can say that things are moving in an autonomous direction. Another one then, and this is a big surprise, this only came across my desk in October, November time, is Alphabet. Alphabet are the parent company of Google, one of the biggest companies in the world. They have a sub business called the X business, or the Moonshot Factory as it's referred to. And they have invested in a project called Mineral. Mineral, sorry for my repetition, but Mineral is a project looking to develop small, light robots to manage plants and the environment on a plant-by-plant basis. Where have we heard that before? So when Google have decided to take on these ideas, throw money at them in a big way, come up with quite a big press release that got a lot of attention in a lot of media outlets, I think, again, we can say automation is going to happen sooner rather than later. And with the likes of Google and their obviously digital expertise involved, I think this is going to be quite a threat potentially to the likes of maybe Small Robot and Earth Rover, because these guys are going to come and play in that very same place and that same space. So it'll be interesting what happens. For all I know, and I don't know this, but those companies might be in talks with Google, I guess. They might be looking to team up. I don't know. But anyway, that's, I think, me done. So I hope that, oh no, it's not quite me done. What is the implication of all this stuff? This is me done, this slide. The implication of what we're doing is that we still require jobs in both agriculture and certainly in agricultural engineering. Automation isn't going to be the end of everything. It's maybe just the beginning. We're going to need skilled fleet managers, people who can control these data heavy systems. We're going to need agronomists who can deal again with that data that's coming from all these remote systems, analyze it, evaluate it, utilize it. We're going to need cybersecurity. If all of our food production is put in the hands of autonomous machines, then that's only one hack away from the switching off of food production. So I think we'll find that cybersecurity already is a massive issue for our industry and hugely overlooked, in my opinion. And we have done some work into it. Many companies think their vehicles are hack proof when sadly, I would say they're not. So cybersecurity in agriculture, who would have thought it 10 years ago? Well, 20 years ago, certainly, but it's going to be a big thing. Agricultural roboticists, people who can link farming with robotics and engineering with robotics and agricultural engineering with robotics. Those skill sets are a bit few and far between at the moment, but it's going to become ever more important. Communication infrastructure development. Yeah, we're going to need decent comms in the countryside so these robotic connected platforms can work. The picture that's on this slide, I always mention, was produced in 1950 something, late 50s, and it was a vision of what farming would look like in the year 2000. So they predicted autonomous farms by the year 2000. So we're just 20 years too late now, but we're getting there. Thank you very much. That is me finished. I apologize, I've taken the whole of the hour. I'm willing to sit here as long as anyone wants to ask questions for, but I appreciate many of you will have to leave and do other things after your lunch break. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kit. That was brilliant. Absolutely, really good presentation. I'm glad you didn't go too deep into certain things because it meant you can then cover such a vast amount of your material. So it's really good. So we have got some questions. If people are happy to run over a little bit, because we've only officially got 2 minutes left. But first question is from Hugh, which is exactly the question I've written down as well. So Hugh, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, Kit. Hi, everybody. Well done, mate. Very good trip across your work, and add my congratulations to the quality of the work and presentation. Very early on in the talk, you described section control as a no-brainer, and yet adoption rates are low. And so my simple question is why? Now, somebody has responded by saying, well, maybe the cost benefit is not clear. Well, if that is the case, then by definition, section control is not a no-brainer. My interest is in investigating your thoughts on, why markets don't adopt apparent no-brainers.
Really good question, Hugh. Okay, so I think if you were looking for a super duper watertight academic study on that, it's the numbers I suggested, 10 to 15%. There probably aren't many. You can model it, frankly. If you just look at overlap, if you just draw yourself a picture on, and model it, you can model a 10% saving. I think that has been done. I don't know if anyone's academically sort of studied the economics of real farms, but certainly there have been numerous articles in the farming press over the years where farmers have said, I'm so glad I took this technology on because I've noticeably used less chemical. So I sort of think it doesn't almost require academic research to show something that's kind of obvious. Why people don't adopt it, I guess it's ticking the box for another 10 grand when you buy your new sprayer. Your sprayer is costing you maybe even, bit high end is £250,000 these days, but that probably would come with auto section, frankly. But if you're in the lower end of the market, if you're, or even what would be the lower end of the market, which is still going to be 70, 80,000 pounds, ticking the box for an extra 10 grand, still a big chunk of money, isn't it? At the end of the day, I guess it's just getting over that ticking of the box. I don't know. I think there's also an element, frankly, it's the same with everything in agricultural, engineering and machinery, is there's the life cycle of a machine. Not everyone's buying brand new kit. It has to go through, maybe, some farmers get things second, third hand. So there's the sort of cycle of things. I would say now that auto steer has found its way onto a high level of farms now because of the second-hand market, and I think auto section hasn't quite found the second-hand market yet. I really think it is a no-brainer. If you're in the market for brand new, it should be a no-brainer. But I don't know, Hugh. I'm sorry, I don't know. I'd like to. Yeah, I don't know. I've recently convinced my brother of it. I think, but that took 5 years, and this is my job.
Okay, well, next time our paths cross, we'll discuss at further length. Hopefully, we'll be able to be doing it over a pint of beer.
Yeah, no, that'd be good.
Okay, Harry Henderson. Harry, do you want to unmute?
Yep, just on it. No, I was just replying. Really, I think it's much of the technology just coming online at the minute it's quite expensive, and it's not that. How can I say? It's not a clear profit. I think the auto steer, as Kit mentioned, is you can get the 10% return on investments, and I'd say with section control, you probably you can get a clear saving if you've got lots of oddly shaped fields. But it's there's a saying out there that everyone but the farmer makes money out of precision farming. So there's a lot of people with making money out of precision farming, and when you get it down to, I do a lot of cost of production work with farmers, and that precision farming isn't up there at the moment. And it could be things that Kit's already mentioned, that using a 12-meter header, you're not really getting that much information from your field, and the resolution's gone down rather than up. So there's lots of things, and whether public money for public goods can step in and produce some payments towards farmers, making sure that what they put on goes in the right place and at the right amount. I think there's an opportunity there as well.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Alan Plum.
Alan's had to leave the presentation, Charlie, but he did say that he'd be happy for you to answer. He'd like the question answered, please, and he'll catch up later.
Okay, so it was a health and safety perspective question about safety protocols and standard being developed and shared with autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I have to flick to my notes now, won't I? So currently ongoing is our work into safety of use. I'm just going to find some notes from a few weeks ago. Where have I got to? I'm just trying to find one thing in particular that's really not that exciting. Here we go. So, okay, in terms of standards and things that exist, if you're manufacturing a autonomous system as a group of engineers on this call, hopefully, and you want to know what you should be doing, you should be referring to ISO 18497 2018. And that is the standard to follow in terms of everything that is autonomous standards for what is on vehicle. What we are trying to lead as Harper Adams and as a wider group of sort of agri-tech and economists here at Harper is a code of practice to allow people to operate, to farmers to operate autonomous machines. As a test center, as a research center, we currently operate using the guidelines that are out from government that are the testing of autonomous systems guidelines. So we follow those guidelines, which are all, and the way in which we follow them is all published on our website. And you can read, it's pretty thin, to be honest. It basically says we need to have safety operators involved in our vehicle. So there's always someone watching our vehicle who can stop them and take control at any given point. What we're trying to do as Harper then is move the agenda on a on-farm user, not developer, but a user code of practice. We've held some meetings about this. There's good appetite, I think, from the industry. We've got lots of people wanting to work with us on that, and we are also in talks with people like the British Standards Institute and things like that to try and move that forward as well. So can't say too much at the moment about quite how that's going to go, but we had a really good meeting in December all about it, which was very positive. Many people on this call were on that, I think. And we are, over the course of this year, hoping to move that agenda considerably forwards to the point where if you're a farmer, there will be a code of practice for you to follow when operating these machines, which should have all been produced to the ISO standard I mentioned before. But at the moment, we're operating essentially as a trial site, and we're following trial site guidelines, which clearly isn't going to be any good for a commercial situation.
Okay, all right, thank you. Probably need to make this the last question, I guess. Tim Chayman has a question. Tim, do you want to unmute?
Yeah. Hello, Kit. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Tim. Yep, got you.
Yeah. You started off obviously talking about the need to reduce soil compaction in the field, and I just wonder whether you've, in your autonomous farm, whether you're planning to monitor the levels of soil compaction imposed, for example, during the harvesting operation, because although it's a small vehicle, it's still pretty heavy and probably exceeds the criteria that McPhee and others came up with, saying that around about 6 megagrams, you're probably going to require some remedial tillage to undo the compaction caused by that sort of machine. And I guess you haven't got all the solutions, but I just wonder if you've got any thoughts about, well, what do you do about the harvesting of really heavy crops and trying to address the compaction issue?
Yeah, so I think firstly, Tim, all of this ideas about autonomous farming all fall down when it comes to harvest. Every idea around the small robot thing falls down when it comes to harvest, because ultimately the minute we have to move bulks of material, size and weight are clearly going to be a factor of that, and moving away from big machines, it gets very complicated, and that is the bit that's most daunting to us, certainly. Right. So harvest is going to be an issue. How the hell you do potatoes without smashing up your soils, I still don't know quite. But in terms of
there is the gantry kit, of course.
yeah, I already gave that a mention, Tim. So in terms of us, we are working with the Crop and Environment Department here at Harper to try and look at the soils, and it's all been very much upset, sadly, by the pandemic. I mean, we had sort of master's students and dissertation, like undergrad students, who were going to monitor all these things, and it's all become very complicated and to do that. Although we're working with the soils academics to hopefully do what we can in terms of monitoring our soils. We're currently now using a class combine, or we will be using a class combine, which is on tracks. I think it weighs 6 tons and it's on tracks. So it's kind of as small and light and as spreading of the load as possible in a way. But you're completely right. The minute you're trying to drag bulks of material across a field is where big is always going to be better for efficiency, essentially, and in terms of your headache as a farmer. But is always going to be bad in terms of the soil, and I'm just not sure quite what we're going to do that. But what we're trying to do is learn as we go, really. I mean, that's the whole point in this project. It's to find the pitfalls, it's to find the flaws, and ask the right questions. I can't think of any right now, but the amount, that I've always said with Hands Free, we opened more questions than we answered. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'd say if you want a consultant on the subject, I'll be living in Shropshire later this year, so close by perhaps. But very happy to contribute if I can do anything.
Cheers. To be honest, I'm interested in your 6 megagram figure. I've never heard that one. If you could send me that one, that'd be useful, where that's from. I've always used 40 kilopascals, which came from a paper or a couple of papers I read at some point. But yeah, that different number.
That of course is a pressure rather than a mass. So
yes, but equally,
it was a CTF conference 2019. So
okay, cool. That'd be good to read that. Marvelous.
Okay. Well, I better start and draw it to a close. I mean, people are welcome to stay on the call after we finish if they've got time, and if Kit's willing to stay on as well to answer any questions. But I mean, thank you, Kit, for taking time out to present. I think everybody found it fascinating. I think you had about 65 people on the call at one point. I know a few have disappeared off, but absolutely brilliant. I suppose one of the things that's always in the back of my mind about autonomous vehicles and getting rid of cabs and things like that all looks great until you have to move the machine around the countryside, as we do in the EU, to different fields. It's great in the plains of America where it stays in the field, but once you've got to start and navigate around some country lanes, you know, are we planning to put everything on the back of trucks and move stuff around? It's a real challenge. So before we close, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. And I hope you will join us for our next lecture on the 16th of February, where it'll be something completely different. We have Richard Dolman, who's the MD of AR Demolition of Nuneaton, and he's going to be giving us a talk on some of the tricky inner city demolition projects they've handled. So that'll be an interesting one anyway. So all that's left to say is thank you again for everybody for joining, and see you next time.